They didn't say it loud, just under their breath, tired voices in the dark. Boots dragging across the concrete as the SEAL team limped back into the outpost after the ambush. Their uniforms were torn, faces streaked with dust and blood. They carried each other more than they walked. They had almost no ammo left. The medic held pressure on a bleeding shoulder. Another leaned against a wall, staring at the ground like it was the only thing keeping him standing. Far above the ridgeline, distant silhouettes moved. They all knew what that meant. One SEAL whispered it first.
It's over.
Another repeated it, barely breathing the words.
It's over.
At the edge of the maintenance bay, a man paused mid-sweep. 65 years old, gray beard, bent posture, old work boots coated in dust. He wore a simple name patch, Rourke. Everyone knew him as the Janitor. Nobody knew anything else. He watched quietly as the SEALs checked their remaining rounds. As the commander stared toward the mountains, listening to approaching footsteps carried on the wind. As the medic whispered for someone to keep pressure on the gauze, the radio crackled with a broken warning. "They're closing in." A SEAL exhaled shakily. "It's over." Mr. Rourke set his mop against the wall. He stepped forward slowly, hands steady, boots scraping gently on the concrete. He walked past the injured men, past the stacked supply crates, past the buzzing floodlight that flickered against his glasses. He reached the old rifle leaning beside a rusted generator. He lifted it with quiet familiarity, checked the chamber with calm precision, racked the bolt with a smooth, practiced motion that froze every man in the room. The SEALs stared at him like time had stopped. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because what Mr. Rourke did next was something no man on that outpost ever forgot. Rourke stood there with the rifle resting against his shoulder, like he'd carried it yesterday, not decades ago. The SEALs stared at him, frozen, unsure if they were looking at a janitor or something else entirely. The commander stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "Sir, you need to get to cover." Rourke didn't move. He didn't blink. His eyes stayed fixed on the darkness beyond the gate, listening to the distant crunch of boots approaching through the gravel. A sound only men who had survived too much could recognize. He pointed at a stack of supply crates. "Bring those forward." A SEAL hesitated. Sir? Now." The tone in his voice made something click inside the room. The men moved. Not because he outranked anyone, but because instinct told them to listen. Rourke walked the length of the bay with slow, controlled steps, studying every corner like he was reading an old map. "Kill that floodlight. Leave the one above the crates." He tapped a fuel drum, listening to the echo. "Roll these left, far left, and when they hit them, it'll sound like a full squad shifting positions." The young SEALs exchanged looks of disbelief. The commander asked quietly, "How do you know all this?" Rourke didn't answer. "We don't have time." He pointed next to the forklift platform. "You three, take the high angle. Short bursts only. Conserve everything." A young operator whispered to another, "How does a janitor know this stuff?" Rourke heard him and said nothing. Outside, the wind picked up. Dust rolled across the concrete like a warning. The silhouettes on the ridgeline grew sharper, more of them now, moving with purpose. Rourke stared into the darkness and said, "We have 3 minutes." A SEAL cursed under his breath. Someone checked their magazine and muttered that they were already dead, and then the first crack of gunfire shattered the night. Tracer rounds tore through the dust. Sparks burst across the barricades. The SEALs dropped behind their makeshift cover. Rourke didn't flinch. He leaned into the generator casing, raised the rifle, and fired one single shot. One. A distant silhouette dropped instantly. A SEAL stared. Rourke fired again. A slow, precise burst. Another silhouette fell behind a rock. Then he murmured, "Flank left." Seconds later, muzzle flashes burst exactly where he predicted. The SEALs turned toward him, shocked. The commander whispered, "There's no way you're guessing." Rourke chambered another round. They'll push the center next. The enemy surged. Gunfire hammered the crates. Dust exploded around them. A SEAL shouted that he was out of ammo. Rourke slid beside him, took his rifle, and did a mag swap so fast the soldier froze in disbelief. "Sir, who are you?" "Get to cover." Rourke shifted position and fired tight, controlled bursts, every shot landing exactly where it needed to. 2 attackers rushed the gate. He dropped both before they raised their rifles. For the first time since the ambush, the SEALs felt the tide shift. But hope didn't last long. The medic shouted from inside the tool room, "Movement on the east fence!" Rourke looked up instantly. "They're trying to split our fire." The commander's voice cracked. "What do we do?" Rourke paused, the faintest emotion flickering behind his eyes. "We finish what we started." He stepped toward the east wall, his limp more pronounced now, but his grip on the rifle steady as stone. The SEALs followed without being told, not because he was the janitor, not because he looked strong, but because leadership doesn't ask for permission. It simply walks forward, and what the SEALs didn't know yet was that Rourke wasn't fighting for them, or for the base, or for glory. He was fighting to bury a ghost he had run from for 30 years, and before the night ended, that ghost was going to find him. Rourke moved along the east wall, boots dragging softly through dust as the night wind carried the sound of metal scraping against the outer fence. The SEALs stacked behind him, breathing hard, hearts pounding, waiting for orders that were never supposed to come from a man who mopped floors. He raised a hand, signaling them to stop. Everyone froze. He leaned into the wall, listening, not with fear, with recognition. A shadow darted across the fence line. Another followed. Then 3 more. The SEAL closest to him whispered, "They're already inside." Rourke shook his head. "Not yet, but they're about to try." His voice didn't waver, didn't crack, didn't belong to a man who changed oil filters and cleared drains. The attackers hit the fence a heartbeat later, rattling it violently, trying to force an entry. Gunfire cracked through the air. Sparks flew. The SEALs returned fire, shots snapping off the metal siding. Rourke stepped into the open, raised the rifle, and fired with rhythm. A steady, surgical cadence. Every round counted. Every shot pushed the attackers back from the fence. A SEAL shouted, "They're regrouping at the south corner." Rourke's voice cut through the chaos. "They're testing our weak points. They'll hit the gate next." "How do you know?" the young SEAL asked, breathless. Rourke's eyes hardened. "Because that's what I would do." They fell silent, just for a second, long enough for realization to sink in. Whoever he used to be, he wasn't just a janitor. A thunderous impact slammed against the main gate. Metal buckled. A second impact followed, harder. Dust rained from the ceiling. Rourke motioned them into position and took the center spot himself. He crouched low, rifle up, breathing steady. The gate bent inward. The commander muttered, barely audible, "This is it." The gate burst open. The first wave poured through. Shadows, muzzle flashes, chaotic movement. The SEALs opened fire, pushing them back in a storm of dust and gunpowder. One attacker charged straight at Rourke. Rourke dropped him cleanly. Another rushed from the side. Rourke shifted, fired, hit center mass. He was everywhere at once, moving with the fluidity of a man half his age and the precision of someone who hadn't forgotten the old world he once belonged to. The SEALs fought hard, but their ammo dwindled. One by one, magazines clicked empty. The medic shouted, "We're dry." Rourke didn't hesitate. "Fall back to the catwalk." They ran, limping, bleeding, exhausted, but moving. Rourke took position on the high metal walkway overlooking the entire outpost. His silhouette stood against the floodlight's dying glow as attackers swarmed through the open gate. He braced the rifle against the railing. The metal groaned under his grip. Below him, the SEALs yelled over the gunfire. "Sir, you can't hold them. You have to move." Rourke didn't respond. He fired. Again, again, again. Every shot slowed the enemy. Every shot bought the SEALs another second. Every shot chipped away at the inevitable. But inevitability catches everyone. Rourke reached for another magazine. Empty. He checked the pouch, empty. He exhaled, long, steady, a breath that carried decades of weight. The attackers pushed into the center of the yard, yelling, advancing, rushing the stairs that led to the catwalk. The SEALs braced themselves for a final stand. And then a distant thunder rolled across the mountains, a low, growing rumble, rotors, aircraft, reinforcements. The first helicopter burst over the ridge, floodlights shredding through the dawn haze. A second followed, then a third. The attackers staggered, blinded, scrambling as the aircraft thundered overhead. The SEALs erupted with renewed fire. The enemy broke, retreated, melted into the rocks as sunrise spilled across the base. The fight was over. The commander sprinted up the metal stairs, boots clanging, heart pounding with every step. "Rourke! Rourke, talk to me!" He reached the top. Rourke sat on the grated platform, leaning against the railing, breathing hard. The empty rifle lay across his lap. He looked like a man who had finally set something down, something he had carried for far too long. The commander crouched beside him. "Sir, who are you?" Rourke gave a tired, quiet smile. "No one you need to salute." The medic arrived, kneeling quickly to check him. Rourke waved him off. "I'm fine," he murmured, even though he wasn't. The young SEALs gathered around, eyes full of the respect they hadn't given him hours earlier. One whispered, "You saved all of us." Rourke didn't answer. He stared out at the mountains glowing gold under the rising sun, a place that had once taken everything from him, a place he had returned to only to clean floor and run from memories. But tonight he had stopped running. He stood slowly, joints aching, picked up his mop from where he had left it leaning by the wall, and walked back into the maintenance bay without a word. The SEALs watched him in silence. The commander finally said, "Some heroes don't wear uniforms anymore." And that was the truth they carried long after the sun rose. If Rourke's story stayed with you, like it stayed with the men he saved, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. This is Mindfront, and we honor every quiet hero the world forgets.